Look at the U.S. debt clock. That number isn't just big. It's predatory. For decades, we were told not to worry. We owe it to ourselves, they said. Deficits don't matter. The national debt was treated like a scary high score in a video game. Shocking to see, but with no real consequences in our daily lives. But in 2024, the game changed. The debt is no longer a number on a screen. It has come alive, and it has started to eat the American budget. Here is the moment everything shifted. For the first time in history, the U.S. government is spending more on interest payments for its past debts than it is on national defense. Let that sink in. America now pays more to its bondholders than it does to equip its entire military. The interest bill alone is nearly $1 trillion a year. This triggers a terrifying financial trap called the debt spiral. To pay the interest on its old credit card, the government has to borrow money on a new one. This makes the total debt larger, which makes next year's interest payment even bigger, which requires even more borrowing. It's a mathematical death loop. So, how do you escape a $38 trillion trap? There are only 3 ways out, and America has already ruled out 2 of them. Option 1 is austerity, brutal tax hikes, and spending cuts. Politically, this is suicide. It won't happen. Option 2 is explicit default, just refusing to pay. For the world's reserve currency, this would cause a global financial apocalypse. It won't happen. That leaves option 3. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's the quiet, polite choice every over-indebted empire eventually makes. It's not a default on the debt. It's a default through the debt. And America has already begun. So if the choices are austerity, collapse, or a quiet trick, America has chosen the trick. But this isn't some new, sinister invention. It's a revival. We are rerunning an economic playbook that's almost 80 years old. Rewind to 1945. World War II had just ended, and the United States was victorious. But it was also drowning in debt. The debt-to-GDP ratio hit 119%, a staggering burden, similar to the crisis level we face today. So what did the government do? Did they raise taxes to punishing levels? Did they slash spending? Did they default? No. They did something much cleverer. They made the debt disappear. Not on paper. The numbers stayed. But in real terms, in purchasing power, they erased it. They used a process called financial repression. Here's how it worked. For over a decade, the Federal Reserve capped interest rates on government bonds at around 2.5%. Meanwhile, inflation averaged over 6%. This meant that every single year, anyone who lent money to the government by buying its bonds lost about 3.5% of their purchasing power. It was a silent, polite wealth transfer. Savers and pension funds were paid back every dollar they were owed. But those dollars bought less food, less fuel, less of everything. The real value of the debt was liquidated. It was a soft default, a default by stealth. And it worked. By the mid-1950s, that crushing 119% debt burden was manageable again. This is the forgotten precedent. This is the proven escape hatched from a debt trap too large to pay. Today, the numbers are different, but the play is the same. The goal is not to pay off the $38 trillion. The goal is to outrun it with inflation, to shrink it into irrelevance by making dollars cheaper. They aren't inventing a new strategy. They are blowing the dust off an old manual. But this time, they've upgraded the tools to make the process smoother and harder for you to see. The 1940s playbook worked, but it was clunky. It relied on simple controls and obvious inflation. Today, the system is more sophisticated. The soft default is engineered through a trio of modern tools designed to be less visible and more powerful. Tool 1, the captive buyer. In a free market, a country with $38 trillion in debt would be seen as a massive risk. Investors would demand sky-high interest rates to lend it more money. They'd say, "You want another loan? That'll be 10% interest." But America can't afford 10%. So, it rigs the market. Through a complex web of banking regulations, with names like Basel III and Dodd-Frank, the government forces its own financial system to be the primary buyer of its debt. Banks, insurance companies, and pension funds are legally required to hold U.S. Treasury bonds as high-quality liquid assets. It doesn't matter if the bonds pay almost nothing or are losing value to inflation. These institutions must buy them to stay in business. This creates artificial, forced demand. It means the government always has a buyer, which keeps interest rates artificially low. Your pension fund isn't loading up on government debt because it's a great investment. It's doing it because it's against the law not to. Tool 2. The broken compass. If you promise to pay people more when inflation rises, like with Social Security checks or certain bonds, the easiest way to save money is to pretend inflation is lower than it really is. This is where the Consumer Price Index, CPI, comes in. Since the 1980s, the way we measure inflation has been quietly rewritten. They introduced something called substitution. If the price of steak soars, the government's math assumes you'll just buy cheaper hamburger instead. So, officially, your cost of living didn't go up as much, even though your standard of living did. They also use hedonic adjustments. If a new car costs $5,000 more, but has a better touchscreen, they argue the price didn't really go up, the quality improved. These statistical tricks shave points off the official inflation number, saving the government billions in payments it otherwise would have to make. The compass is broken. They are gaslighting you about the cost of your own survival to make their debt math work. Tool 3. Fiscal dominance and the money printer. This is the master switch. Historically, the Federal Reserve's job was to be independent, to protect the value of the dollar. Its tool was interest rates. But we have now entered an era of fiscal dominance. The debt is so large that the Fed's primary job is no longer fighting inflation. It's keeping the U.S. Treasury solvent. When big foreign buyers like China or Japan slow their purchases of our debt, who steps in? The Federal. Through programs like quantitative easing, QE, it creates new digital dollars out of thin air to buy the bonds nobody else wants. This floods the system with new money, propping up the bond market and keeping interest rates low. The result? The government's interest bill stays manageable. But there's a side effect. All that new money flows into stocks, real estate, and assets. It creates the everything bubble. Prices detach from reality. Your 401k statement looks great, but it's a monetary mirage. You have more dollars, but each one buys less. This is the modern machinery. Captive buyers provide the demand, a broken CPI hides the true cost, and a compliant central bank prints the difference. Together, they form the engine of the invisible default. But this engine doesn't run smoothly for everyone. It has a cruel, built-in flaw that is tearing the economy apart. The machinery of the invisible default doesn't affect everyone equally. In fact, it is the primary engine behind the widening inequality you see every day. To understand why, we need an 18th century lesson from a French economist named Richard Cantillon. He observed a simple but devastating truth. Where new money enters, the economy matters. When the Federal Reserve prints $1 trillion through quantitative easing, it doesn't airdrop it over Main Street. It doesn't mail a check to every citizen. It injects that money directly into the financial sector, to big banks and investment firms. These institutions get the new money first. They get it at near zero cost. And what do they do with it? They buy assets, stocks, real estate, private companies. They bid up the prices of things that are already owned by the wealthy. By the time this new money trickles down to the average person in the form of a slightly higher wage or a stimulus check, the damage is already done. The price of houses, stocks, and groceries has already been inflated. The rich get the money before inflation. The poor and middle class get it after. This is the Cantillon effect. It's why, since the 2008 financial crisis, we've lived in a K-shaped economy. The top 10%, who own the assets, have seen their wealth explode. The bottom 90%, who live on wages, have seen their purchasing power slowly strangled. The rising tide of new money doesn't lift all boats. It lifts the yachts and swamps the rowboats. This dynamic has killed a fundamental pillar of the American dream, safe saving. For decades, the advice was simple. Work hard, save your money in the bank, buy a few government bonds for safety. This was the 60-40 portfolio. It was designed for a world where the dollar held its value. In our world of fiscal dominance, that advice is now financial suicide. A savings account earning 4% while real inflation is 7% guarantees you a 3% annual loss. You are paying to lend your money to the bank. We have entered the era of forced speculation. To simply preserve what you have, you are now forced to take risks. You must gamble in the stock market, chase real estate, or dive into volatile assets just to outrun the silent theft of your savings. The safe option is being systematically destroyed. This is the real cost of the $38 trillion debt. It's not just a number. It's a mechanism for transferring wealth from savers and wage earners to the state and the asset-owning class. But for those in power, even this might not be fast or complete enough. There is a final tool being built, designed to close the last escape hatch. The tools we've seen, captive buyers, a broken CPI, and a money printer fused to the treasury, are powerful. But they have a limit: cash. Physical dollar bills are the public's final check on this system. If the government and the Fed push too far, with negative interest rates or blatant devaluation, people can simply pull their money out of the banks. They can exit the digital system and hold tangible cash. This exit valve has historically kept extreme financial repression in check. The endgame is to remove that valve. The ultimate tool is already in development: the central bank digital currency, CBDC. A digital dollar, issued and directly controlled by the Federal Reserve, is not just about convenience. It's about control. It would allow for capabilities that are impossible with physical cash. Programmable money, expiry dates on stimulus funds, forcing you to spend. Negative interest rates enforced directly. A fee automatically deducted from your digital wallet to penalize saving. Complete transaction surveillance. Every payment tracked in real time. This is the logical conclusion of fiscal dominance. It ensures that when the next debt crisis hits, you cannot opt out. Your wealth can be managed, directed, or even diluted with a few lines of code, all in the name of economic stability. China's digital yuan is the live prototype for this future. The story of the $38 trillion debt isn't about a future crash. It's about a present process. America has chosen the ancient path of the soft default, eroding the value of its money to erode the weight of its debts. The real crisis is silent. It's in the shrinking paycheck, the impossible house price, and the savings that won't keep up. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. To see how this story has played out before, and what desperate governments do next, you need to watch our next video. We break down the single most aggressive wealth seizure in American history, the 1933 gold confiscation. It's the blueprint for what can happen when the silent default isn't enough. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. Understand the past to protect your future.